So usually when I make these videos, I try to think of a very clever introduction, but today we're not going to do any of that. Instead, I'm just going to tell you the simple truth about this guitar. This is, for sure, the most versatile PRS SE guitar, period. And although this is also one of the most expensive PRS SE guitars, I still think it is perhaps the best value in the PRS line, period. Welcome back to The Experiment, the series where I explore a single gear category in extreme detail over an extended period of time. The series is sponsored by PRS. Check out video number 1, link below for more information on the sponsorship. And all of the guitars that I'm using are also linked below in the PRS SE Experiment Sweetwater list. We're going to start from the headstock and work our way down like always. And the first thing you're going to notice about this SE guitar is that it is different from every other one in the line. And that's because the headstock is actually brown and it does not match the color of the body. I think that they kept the headstock brown because having a bright blue headstock to match the bright blue body might look a bit much for this particular instrument. And while we're talking about the color of the body, I should also mention that this is actually not the color that I like the most. I actually prefer the brown version of this guitar, but anyway, none of that matters for why this guitar is amazing, so let's just keep going. So we have the brown headstock, the non-locking PRS tuners, and in case you forgot which guitar it is, it says Piezo on the truss rod cover. Now, another big difference between this guitar and the other PRS SE guitars is that the other guitars have a composite nut that's listed as a PRS nut. This guitar actually has a real bone nut, and I think the bone nut is a good choice considering the acoustic properties of this guitar, which again we'll get to very soon. Now, if you've been following along with the experiment or if you've tried any PRS SE guitars, this neck is going to be fairly familiar to you, but it does have some important distinguishing features. So it is the PRS wide fat profile, which is very, very comfortable. And honestly, although it's listed as wide and fat, it's certainly not overly fat or overly wide. Again, it just feels like a nice, somewhat chunky C-shaped neck. So that's great. And like usual, this guitar came up set up perfectly out of the box. I'm gonna tell you a little secret. This guitar, along with the Mark Holcomb guitar, are the ones I've been playing the most because they are my two favorites. And I have not adjusted this guitar whatsoever. I haven't changed the strings, the height, the truss rod, nothing. I've been playing this guitar a ton, exactly how it came from the factory. So again, the setup on these guitars is just so darn good. So the front ends are of course perfect. There's not a sharp front edge anywhere on the neck. The neck is perfectly leveled. There isn't a dead spot anywhere on the neck. Nice big jumbo frets, and it's just super fun to play this guitar, but we're going to talk more about that a little bit later. Now, in terms of the special features, this guitar does have the PRS bird inlays, but they are a bit more fancy looking. I believe that's a technical term. And then the maple is also showing on the side. So we have this nice flame maple binding that goes on the neck, the rest of the body, and the headstock itself, and it's just absolutely gorgeous to look at. Of course, this PRS guitar has the typical PRS cutaway, which is on the front of the instrument, so as you get to the higher frets, it is very comfortable to play. And we also have a 25-inch radius, and I'll just say this again about the PRS SE guitars. I'm really happy that there is a variety of different specs to choose from. There's thick necks, there's less thick necks. There's 25-inch scale length, or 24.59, or 277, or 25.5. There's 20-inch radius, there's 10-inch radius. There's just a lot of different options within this line, which I really appreciate. And again, this one is one of the most comfortable for me personally. Now, as we leave the neck and get to the body, this is where we have a lot to talk about. Let's start with the most simple aspect of this guitar. Number one, it has a beautiful flame top, and the back of the guitar is also flamed. This blue is absolutely gorgeous. It's deep and it's rich, and it does match the inlays very nicely. Now, this is an entirely hollow guitar. A lot of times when you see guitars like this with these F-holes, there's a center block in the middle, and that center block is where the bridge rests along with the pickups. That is not the case with this instrument. It is hollow on the sides, it's hollow right underneath the pickups, and that contributes to the uniqueness of this particular instrument. Now, of course, since this is a hollow body guitar, it's going to be fairly lightweight, but I personally don't like to tell you the exact weight of my instruments because they're going to vary to some degree from what you might actually buy. But of course, if you shop with Sweetwater, you can see the exact weight of the instrument you're going to get, and you can see the exact top and choose based on what you find the most attractive. And if you're going to shop with Sweetwater, using my affiliate link below is an easy way to support the channel with no additional cost to you. So now I want to talk to you more about the pickups, the piezo bridge, and why the hollow body matters on this guitar. But we have to make a slight detour, but I promise it will be useful. So I'm someone who really likes to listen to jazz, and I like to play jazz blues and jazz influenced stuff, but I'm definitely not a traditional jazz guitarist. That's not me. And I know a lot of you are the same way. You might like elements of jazz, but you don't have a desire to become a guitarist who only plays jazz. And if you're someone who really likes the idea of mixing a lot of different styles like jazz and rock and blues and fusion, all types of stuff, you're going to want to check out my course link below. Okay, if you dabble in jazz, you probably already know that the typical, most common jazz style guitar is a full archtop guitar with a pickup that's either floating, meaning it's just connected to the neck and not connected to the body, or a pickup like this one that's actually drilled into the body of the instrument. Now, I love archtop guitars. In fact, I love acoustic guitars of all varieties, and I have quite a few. But to be completely honest, I can't even show you them right now because they're not in this room. They're not behind this barrier. They're back in the back room. And that's simply because it's pretty difficult to constantly switch between playing a full archtop guitar and a fully electric guitar. The way you hold the instrument is different. The way you have to pick is different. The way that the strings feel is different. And although they're amazing instruments, they are simply more temperamental than an electric guitar. That just comes with an acoustic guitar in that territory. Now, the reason I've been enjoying this guitar so much is because I have basically 95% of a full archtop guitar, but I have 100% of the playability of an electric guitar. And so this guitar strikes an amazing balance between those two styles of guitars. Now, I know a lot of you are going to be thinking that there's no way that this guitar can replicate an archtop guitar. And no, it can't perfectly replicate an archtop guitar. But since it's a full hollow body, it's actually pretty loud when you're just playing it by yourself. And if you've played any archtop guitars, a lot of them actually don't sound that great to the listener. They sound great to the audience because the sound projects forward, but it doesn't sound like a dreadnought acoustic guitar, for example, to the actual performer. So when you're actually playing an archtop versus this guitar, it actually sounds fairly similar. And I don't want to get into the debate about whether or not the acoustic properties of this instrument will actually translate to the audience, but I will say this: most guitarists on this planet spend most of their time playing a guitar to themselves and not in front of an audience. And usually when we play to ourselves, we're not playing at stage volume. And so if you're sitting in a room practicing for a lot of your time, or even just playing with yourself, playing guitar with yourself, having the acoustic properties of this instrument in the room, along with your amp, if you're using one, and just feeling that resonance against the body, it just makes for a very enjoyable playing experience for the performer. So I think this guitar is absolutely amazing, and I'm actually in the process of selling all of my archtop guitars because this is just a better option for me if I'm thinking about trying to reduce the amount of gear that I have. So in terms of the electronics, this guitar is also fairly unique for the PRS SE line. We have two humbucking pickups and they sound fantastic. In the middle position, instead of having a coil from each, we have both pickups combined, which also sounds great. And then we have a master volume knob and a master tone knob. But we also have a third knob right here, which controls the amount of volume you're getting for the piezo bridge. So this guitar actually has two different jacks. If you plug into the jack right at the top here, you're going to get just the electric guitar tone. So even if you don't have a battery plugged into the instrument, you can still get all of the electric tones without an issue. If you have a jack just plugged into the second slot here, you're going to get all of the pickups together, and you can blend in how much piezo bridge or how much of the magnetic pickups you want with that output. If you put a jack in each of the two outputs, then you can split the magnetic sound and the piezo sound separately. And then of course you can mix them all separately. Now, a lot of other guitars that have a piezo bridge have just one jack, and they have a mechanism whereby you plug a jack in and then you split it, that jack, with like a Y cable and send it to two different amps. I actually prefer this version better than that version of guitar. That's like on a Parker Nightfly or a Parker Fly guitar, for example. And the reason I prefer this version is because you don't have to worry about getting a fancy cable that can split the outputs. God forbid that Y cable breaks, you have to go find another store that actually has it in stock that's long enough, so on and so forth. It's just easier to grab two standard 1/4-inch cables, plug them both in, send them to different places, that you can get all of your mixed tones with this guitar. So before we get into all of the versatility, I just want to show you how good these magnetic pickups are by themselves in this guitar. And in fact, I think there's another version of this guitar that just has the magnetic pickups. So if you don't care about the piezo bridge, that's fine. Get the less expensive version with just the magnetic pickups, and it's a great guitar anyway. But let's just quickly go through the different tones on this guitar. So in terms of the magnetic sounds, we don't have any push-pulls or anything like that. And I think that just these basic 3 tones are super, super usable. And I'm just going to go through quickly some of the versatility with these different pickups with some of the sounds that I use on a daily basis when I'm practicing. So this tone I kind of stumbled across by accident. I have both pickups combined, and this kind of gives me a old school jazz kind of a sound, almost like it's coming through an old recording. I really, really like it. Then I have my standard bluesy tone, which is going to be for me the neck pickup, Fender amp, kind of on the edge of breakup. So those are all of the magnetic pickup sounds. I really love them, and that's really all you're going to need for a lot of situations. But then we also, of course, have the piezo bridge. Getting a great tone out of a piezo bridge is a totally different process than getting a good sound out of magnetic pickups. And if you just plug a piezo system into a regular electric guitar amp, it's going to sound pretty bad. So once again, I asked my friend and great guitarist Matthew Dale to teach us a little bit about getting a great sound out of a piezo bridge, and he has some really, really great advice for us.
Hey Andre, good to see you again, and thanks for having me back on your channel. Let's get into the axe effects and dial in some great tones for piezo pickups. Now, when we think about dialing in great acoustic tones out of a piezo-equipped guitar, we need to think a little bit more like a sound engineer and a little less like a guitar player, and I'll explain what I mean. Now, the first great tip for dialing in any tones would be utilizing the looper. This really helps you listen to what your guitar is sounding like and not be distracted by your playing. So, using my own piezo-equipped guitar, I recorded this loop that sounds like this. And this is just our direct signal going from the input to the output. This is a passive piezo element, so it's a little bit dark and a little bit mid-rangey. So the first thing that we want to do is really sort of sculpt this, but we want to sculpt this in a very unique way. Piezo pickups, although they're great at detecting the vibrations of the individual strings, are kind of missing out on the acoustic element, the actual physical box element of an acoustic guitar. And just as we would capture the acoustic elements of a speaker cabinet through a microphone with an impulse response, we can do the exact same thing with acoustic guitar impulse responses. So our first level of dealing with this tone is going to be bringing in some acoustic guitar impulse responses. And I have the Holy Grail free pack from worship tutorials that I downloaded and I put into this preset, and we're going to put this into the IR player. But you can hear we have a much more natural sound to our guitar. It sounds a lot more acoustic. And for the amp, I called in the tube pre-type. This is just a very clean tube pre-amplifier, kind of like an old vintage unit that we can use to sculpt the tone a little bit more going into the IRs. So I cut a little bit of the bass, a little bit of those piezo mids. I added the bright switch and added a nice high end. This might be a little bit much. Got the level up a little bit more. And now we're going to start thinking like a sound engineer. I want to almost treat this like I'm going into the front end of a desk. So compression is our friend here. This is kind of the instant better button. This is starting to sound really good with our compressor. Now I want to further EQ this signal, and I want to take out all the excess lows and all the excess highs and any sort of rogue frequencies that are building up from our IR and our acoustic guitar. So if I call this in, here's what all of the bands are listening to. That's all the low end that I'm filtering out of here. This is our first band here. Right around 190, we have this low mid buildup that I don't really like in acoustic guitar tones. And then right around 400 to 500, we'll have kind of this honky piezo mid-range that I wanted to bring down a little bit as well. And then just a general guitar frequency, 2K is generally very harsh. This is also the resonant frequency of the human ear canal. So bringing this down a little bit can help some aggressive guitar tones. Last, I just want to filter out any sort of excess high like we hear here, and that's around 15K. Altogether, here's without the parametric EQ and then with. Just an extra polish on that guitar tone. I like a little bit of reverb to add a bit of space to our direct signal. Last thing, if you want the icing on the cake, it would be to use the pitch block for a little bit of pitch ambience in this stereo field. This sounds more like a chorus, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this down just to about 10%, just for a little bit of that added space. Now, just to show you what it all sounds like, here's our original signal, dark and mid-rangey, and here are all the blocks that we use to get a much better tone. And that is an acoustic guitar tone that I would happily gig with. If you want some more great tips and tricks for your Axe-Fx or your other fractal unit, then you should stay tuned for my upcoming course, Fractal Fundamentals. You can learn more by going to my website, MatthewDale.com. But until then, if you want to dial in some great tones really fast, then you should check out my blocks library. Just go to MatthewDale.com/blocks.
So now I basically just took the exact setup that Matthew Dale just explained to you, and I have that going through the piezo bridge, and then I have another cable connected to the guitar, and that's going through an entirely different electric guitar rig. And now at this point, there's a lot of different things that I could theoretically do. I could have it on an expression pedal, the top part being the electric rig, the bottom part being the piezo bridge, and I can kind of decide how much of each I want. I could have them both going through different speakers, all types of different things. But for right now, I just have them going through the same exact output, and I'm going to control the amount of each sound with the onboard controls right here. So I'm going to start by showing you kind of the most extreme thing you can do. On my magnetic pickup side, I have set up a Marshall-driven sound, and it sounds like this. And then on my piezo bridge, I have the standard acoustic sound. And as you can see, I can quickly just go between those two by using the volume knobs on the guitar. But if I really wanted to, I suppose I could put them both on together. And then we have an acoustic sound along with a Marshall driven sound. Now, although all of that stuff is really fun, the thing that always excited me most about having a piezo bridge, even on my Parker guitars, was my jazz influence and especially my love for the guitarist Martin Taylor. And he has a signature Yamaha archtop guitar that's hard to find, but it's one of the few archtop guitars and one of the first that had this kind of a system whereby it had a magnetic pickup in the front and then it also had a piezo bridge. And his ability to get a great tone by mixing the magnetic pickups and the piezo bridge really inspired me in terms of getting a nice, warm, clean jazz tone. And I'm not going to try to do it exactly the way he does. I'm going to give you my own take on that kind of a concept. So I'm going to switch to a Fender amp with the normal settings, everything on full. It sounds like this. Dropping down the volume to about 8 and the tone to about 5 or 6, we get this kind of a sound. That type of a jazz tone can lack a bit of body, and it can really be hard to stand out in an ensemble if you're playing a lead with that type of a tone. This is really great for playing comping stuff, you know. Great for that type of a thing, and it's even great for playing by yourself. But again, in the context of an ensemble, this can get buried at times. So one thing that's really fun to do is just to break in a bit of that piezo bridge. And you'll remember from Matthew Dale's section that piezo sound is a lot brighter and it's a lot sharper. It has a lot more presence. And that's exactly what this tone right now is missing. So I'll blend that in just at maybe 2 or 3. It doesn't take much. It's a huge difference. This sound is really, really nice, especially for playing, you know, chord melodies and arrangements of different songs. So really from simple jazz tones to entirely acoustic tones to mixing rock tones with acoustic tones, this guitar has so much versatility. Now the bridge on this guitar, in addition to being a piezo bridge, is also a wraparound. So you string the strings down and around on top of the bridge, and it feels as comfortable as every other PRS bridge, and it works just fine. You can adjust the height pretty easily with these 2 giant posts, and it just works. There's not much else to say about it. And the final feature you should know about this instrument is that it comes with a hard shell case instead of the padded gig bag that comes with a lot of the other PRS guitars. If you appreciate all the tones that I'm including in this particular review, give me a like to help support the channel. When you see the price of this particular guitar, a lot of people get a bit upset because this is a guitar that's not made in America. It's not part of PRS's most expensive USA line, and yet it is above $1,000 US. And here's my take on the whole price of this guitar, considering it's an import model guitar. And if you think this opinion I'm about to give you is colored by the fact that I'm sponsored for this series, just go back and watch the Strandberg Experiment, where I bought and played a $3,000 guitar made in Asia without a sponsorship. I say the exact same thing there that I'm going to say right here, right now. I personally don't care where an instrument is made as long as it's made at a very high quality. I think we're well beyond this idea that a guitar has to be made in Europe or has to be made in the United States in order to be of a great quality. As long as the instrument is made well, it's inspected well, it's set up well, and it sounds good, I personally don't care. When I pick up this guitar and I see that the fretwork is literally perfect, there's not a single QC issue anywhere on this instrument. The pickups are fantastic. The piezo bridge works amazingly well. We have a flame top. We have a bone nut. I don't really know what I can complain about for this guitar. And if you watch the channel frequently enough, you know that I've reviewed other guitars that were made in Europe or that were made in the United States that were more expensive than this guitar, and they were riddled with QC issues or other important structural issues. So again, if you only buy guitars that are made in America, this guitar comes in a core model. I'm sure that one is even better. But for me personally, at this price point, this guitar is frankly unbeatable. And that's why I play it more than any other PRS guitar that I currently have, except for the Mark Holcomb, which this guitar is, in my opinion, tied with. But of course, these two guitars are made for two very different things. Anyway, I'm Andre Flood. My Patreon is not a donation. There's custom lessons, custom Q&As, all types of stuff. You can check it out, link below, and I'll talk to you soon.